Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I will be walking you through how I made this very cute little grumpy cat ornament, which it's up here because it already went to a client, which is always super exciting. Anyways, let's begin with the tools. So first up, and maybe the most important tool out of this, are the Arteza wood ornaments, which by the way, I'll have all of this linked in the description below, and none of it is like a promotion or like an ad or anything. These are just the tools that I've used and I really enjoy. But yeah, so first up, the Arteza wood slices. So these are already made into ornaments. They have the holes and they also come with twine. And it's a 45 pack, as you can see. I've used about 40 of these. I have 2 packs and I really enjoy the quality. And then as for the paint, I am using gouache, which is a type of watercolor paint in this video. And I like using gouache over acrylic for a number of reasons, but I really like the fluidity of gouache and the mixing capabilities. And also gouache is a little bit more forgiving than acrylic when you make mistakes. So the one I use specifically is the Reeves brand, but I'm honestly not sure if they make these anymore. This is probably honestly pretty old. So I did end up buying some new paint from Flick this holiday season when I was making these, but really any type of gouache is perfect. So for the next one, I'm going to talk about my paintbrushes, which might be a little hard to see because they're a little bitty. So I just used 2 different paintbrushes. One is for detail work and one was for the background. As for just the final touches or the final finishes, I really recommend having a UV resistant clear spray. So this one is a matte finish. And you really won't see the spray once you're done, but it will kind of help protect it from the sun or any water damage, and it will make sure your ornament is long lasting. And the final detail is going to be like whatever you want to tie it up with. So I've seen people use ribbons, the Arteza wood ornaments come with twine, but I personally like tying it off with this faux suede. I think it gives it a little bit of like a nicer finish. I might be wrong, but I like the way the faux suede looks and a little bit more modern than twine. Now, Arteza does actually come with twine, so if you just wanted to buy the wood ornaments and didn't want to mess with like ribbons or suede cord or anything, you could totally just use the twine. I will talk a little bit more about that at the end, so let's get started. Starting the painting off, you can see that we have our grumpy cat outline already sketched onto the ornament. You could trace this from the internet with a photo that you found, but I honestly recommend practicing some hand sketching here rather than tracing, especially since the outline doesn't need to be perfect, but it will help us place her features later on. The next step is starting to paint the background. I always recommend painting what's furthest away from you and then building up towards yourself. This way you can layer texture onto the background easily and also make sure the background is the color that you want. I'm doing a solid blue here so that Grumpy stands out. This paint is mixed with a decent amount of water so that I can get good coverage, but it's also not too thin so that it's more opaque. Normally I do have to do a few layers to kind of remove the wood tone from showing up behind it. It is key here to carefully go around the outline because we still need the outline when we are painting later on. Next up are her eyes, which I start to fill in with blue and white. I did the eyes next because I'm honestly still waiting for the blue to dry and I don't want the paint next to it to kind of fade into the background. I'd rather the background be a crisp blue, so I need it to dry first. The first color I'm going to work on here on Grumpy is white, and again mainly because the white is happening in the center. And I need to work in the center so that the background still has time to dry. If you don't want a pure color in your background, you can always mix in colors Like, let's say for the blue, I could have mixed in green and had it kind of fade together, and that would have been done while the paint was wet. Once the first layer is down, I move on to a black, or kind of a more black-brown color, and paint this where I see it in the photo. On this specific photo, it is happening in her ears and a couple of other places. I am going to do a small dab of pink on her nose, and then continue working on adding a little bit more cream tones to her face. These layers, as you can see, are light, and I can still see the wood through them. Honestly, I plan on adding a ton more texture, a ton more layers of paint to really help create depth in this painting. So she has a really great dynamic color. It's not just pure cream, it's not white, it's not brown. And honestly, most of the time, pets are not just one color. Like, they have multiple different colors, unless they are literally just pure white or pure black. And it definitely changes depending on the light that's hitting their fur. By using a cream or light tan first, I can layer whites on top of it and really help those whites pop. So in general, I like to start out with a little bit darker and work up to lighter layers. And then kind of go back and forth in between those until I really like the contrast. Essentially, I'm just going to fill in the bottom layers using really small dashes with a very tiny brush. I do add a little bit of highlights to her eyes so that they have time to dry before I paint her pupil. Next up is another layer of hair. So this is, again, we're stepping closer to us as the viewer as we paint layers. As you can see, this brown is going in front of the cream so that the texture will be layered on top of it. It's important to let layers dry and letting the ornament dry as you go, otherwise it's going to all bleed together. And keeping the dashes really small, as you can see, starts bringing out a lot of nice texture and really makes her feel a little bit fluffier. I'm slowly going around and adding and dashing some light brown into the areas and starting to add some darker browns. You can really see that Grumpy Cat is kind of forming more here, and it's no longer like a little blob on an ornament. Also, next up are adding her pupils, which are just black here. I didn't add too much because my white wasn't dry yet. So again, perfect example, wait for it to dry completely before adding another paint layer on top. I also didn't really love the depth in the cream that I had so far, so I am adding in a little bit more grays and darker tans, just to help with the brighter whites that I'm going to add later on. A fun addition are the little hairs along her ears. Cats almost always have hair sprouting from their ears, and Grumpy is no exception. I randomly lay down some sprays of hair, which look really sharp against the bright blue background and add that little extra layer of detail. Next up are outlining her eyes, which I do here in black. Almost all cats have black outlines to their eyes, almost like eyeliner around them. And also, still using my black, I go around and add some more of the darks and then go in with my bright whites where I want some more depth. The white is essential because it really brings out that contrast and pulls out the little hairs and details. As I go around adding white, I start adding some wispy hairs to the background so that she really looks nice and fluffy. Now it's really just time to keep adding more details and using the tiny brush to really work on her hair. I love this part because it's really what sets these apart and makes them look a little bit more like fine art. My goal is typically to add as much detail as possible, so anything I can see on a picture, I will try to add. And just adding on to that, this is really just one way to paint. And it's kind of my way of doing these, but you could either make this way more complicated, add tons more texture and hair and details than I do, or you could really keep it a little bit more cartoony with doing less details. The final part are some of my favorites to add on to a painting. So these are the whiskers, which pretty much every single animal has, so I have a lot of fun painting them. I always save these for last because they go on top of everything else. So this is going to be our last layer, whereas the blue was our first layer. We're now ending up on the whiskers, which if you think about it, the whiskers are going to be the items closest to you in this painting. And honestly, Grumpy has some amazingly wild little dudes, so it's really just fun to go with the flow on these. Most cats also have white whiskers, but some do have a mix of black and white, or honestly, some have pure black. Grumpy Cat has white ones, so I'm using a crisp white, which is almost the whitest that I've used on this painting to really make them pop out. And yeah, so that's the final painting step. To move on past this point, if you're wanting this ornament or wood slice to last a long time, then I recommend finishing it with a UV resistant spray to protect it from water or sun damage. I spray them down at least 3 times, and essentially I stop seeing the wood change as I spray it. That way, on my final layer of spray, the wood really isn't soaking up any more of the spray. I then take a string of suede and tie it off so that people can hang them up. Alright, thanks guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.